thank you for being here. Trace, thank you for opening your home. We appreciate it. Susan, thank you for opening your home. Susan's back there at the table. Dr.Tres.Tanner, my friend. Yes. He has devoted much of his career to strengthening families and helping individuals, primarily in California, Utah, and Puerto Rico. They have quite the posterity. He and his wife Susan have 13 children, 58 grandchildren, 8 great-grandchildren, with 1 grandson on the way. And they now live here in Sandy, as you can see right here. Brother Tanner completed a 2-year mission to the Andes mission in Peru and Ecuador in 1968, 1970. I think he just told us a few minutes ago, and you were there as well. And did you say a couple of others were there?
No, no one else in this room, but we have a lot of listeners in the Andes mission.
That's remarkable. He and his wife Susan also served in the Salt Lake City Hispanic Initiative for 3 years. He has served in a wide variety of church callings, including over 10 years as an ordinance worker in the Jordan River and Oker Mountain temples. Trace earned his degree from BYU, his undergraduate degree, and then studied at Chapman University and earned his PhD from Florida State in 1975, where he was also a university fellow. He taught at the university level for 8 years, where he was an associate professor and department chair. His academic teaching included students at the University of Utah, BYU Salt Lake Center, and the School of Professional Psychology in San Diego. Trace, in 1972, began coaching. He began his counseling and coaching clients as a marriage, family, and child counselor and life relationships coach. He's been doing this a long time. His other professional roles have included, he's been a seminar and marriage retreat leader, he's been a professional speaker, and he has been a radio program host. That's a good story. Trace is also an author. He, let's see, some of the resources he's created include Home Work. It's a publication focused on helping employees achieve success in both their personal and work lives. It was endorsed by 6 Fortune 500 companies. A second work authored by Trace is Helping Kids Succeed in School. It's a parent involvement audio learning program where he incorporated input from an international team of 23 contributing authors. He and his wife Susan co-authored a book called Enjoy the Journey Along Your Marriage Highway. It's a book that he and Susan authored together and has sold 4,000 copies in Mexico and Central America. And he actually has at $20 if you're interested tonight. He's got some in the back there, and he always suggests to buy them in tandem because a couple always comes in a pair, right?
The ones in Mexico, those were the Spanish translation version. That wasn't the ones around the country.
Right. Thank you. Trace also has a food for thought, which I think probably raise your hand if you receive his food for thought, because if you put that your email audience board, you are getting food for thought every month. And it's similar to me, I think, Paul Harvey's The Rest of the Story. He's put out some good ones over the years. His thoughts are shared monthly and are enjoyed by thousands of readers worldwide. I want to welcome Dr. Tres.Tanner. He has devoted much of his life and career to strengthening families and helping individuals, and that's the intent of us being here tonight. So let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Tres.Tanner.
It is good to be here and have many of you here, and there's a couple people that came that I didn't know were coming, so good for you. Good for us all. So, here's our topic tonight, marriage in the last days, how your marriage can both survive and thrive during these last days. So, the subtext of this is
it's really going to focus on the tough challenges and the incredible blessings during the last days, and practical ways that couples can both navigate the challenges and access the blessings. Wanted to say a couple things before we jump into it in more depth. Here's the truth of the matter. We could talk 3 days. I've done marriage enrichment retreats that lasted 3 days. We could do a seminar or a workshop about the last days. It would take several days too. We're trying to condense all this stuff into an hour and a half or two, which is no small task based on the kind of stuff that I'm trying to provide the most important information about. So but what happened is when I thought about the whole idea of marriage, I've done stuff for marriage for a long time. But we are living in the last days. And when I decided to do a presentation, it occurred to me that we couldn't really address marriage very well and how people can survive and thrive in their marriages unless we put it in the context of the last days. So I chose to cover a lot of information. In fact, the predominant amount of information is probably going to be about last days things. And I hope you'll bear with me, and I hope you'll appreciate that by understanding those things, hopefully some of the information we talk about marriage will make more sense. So, I got to tell you something about where this whole last days came from. You see that stack of books? My wife and I, for the last 3 or 4 years, have been studying about the last days, and it's become increasingly it's interesting, significant, and important to us both in learning just exactly what is and will continue to happen in the last days. So I'm really trying to distill a lot of material. But we've studied plenty of things in the scriptures themselves, especially Isaiah, Ezekiel, John the Revelator, Moroni, Ezra. Some of you may or may not be familiar with Ezra. He wrote one of the apocryphal books, etc. But the other thing is, I've learned for myself, because I went to college and grad school and all that stuff. I feel like I've tapped into some people that know far, far, far more than I ever will about the last days, because they spent decades studying it. In fact, one of the authors of 2 or 3 of the books, and by the way, I'm going to give you references on these books, was the comment made by Hugh Nibley. Hugh Nibley said, the guy's name is Avram Gileadi. Have you ever heard of Avram Gileadi? Some of you already have. He was a convert to the church when he was going to rabbinical school in Jerusalem. Then he joined the church. He did his doctorate at BYU on Isaiah, and then he spent 7 years after getting his doctorate studying Isaiah in more depth. So what Hugh Nibley said is Gileadi knows more about Isaiah than any person on the planet. So he's a pretty good source of it, because a lot of things about the last days does come from Isaiah. And a lot of people say, Isaiah, oh yeah, those sections in the Book of Mormon, we just kind of skip through those because it's darn hard to understand. But he and some other people have made that much more understandable, which is very important because that helps you to really get what's going on in the last days. Anyway, I wanted to say a couple other things before we launch into it. I want you to understand something. I have no expectation that you are going to believe everything I talk about today. Some of the things are going to sound very understandable. Some of them are going to seem self-evident. Some of the things are going to sound like, what? You're not going to really kind of get that. You're going to question many of the things that you hear tonight. And I get that. My only request is you keep an open mind, and then you do your own study to scrutinize for yourself things so that you will come to understand, both by study and by prayer, to what extent these things truly resonate as true or not. So that's what I'm going to say about that. Now, As you recall in the handout, the flyer that you got, the handout, the flyer, it mentioned some things that you were going to learn. And so I wanted to at least make sure I addressed right up front. I don't know if you remember, but I said among things that you'll learn are why some people don't know much at all about the last days, and why other people don't want to learn anything about the last days. We're going to cover that right now. Okay? So, by asking yourself if any of these reasons, because the first things we're going to cover here are some of the reasons why people don't know, but especially why they don't want to know about the last days, and see if any of these things apply to your own lives. Because if they do, then you might be able to say, maybe I can do something different and not have those counterproductive things get in our way. So with that said, here we go. A lot of folks don't know that much about last days because they just simply haven't spent the time either scrutinizing the scriptures or if they run across scriptures that are a little tough to understand, i.e. the Isaiah chapters in the Book of Mormon, which people tend to skip over, and things that we just don't really get. So we just kind of move along without taking the time to ponder that. So here's a related challenge. Even though we might spend some time reading about these things, we fail to include as part of our efforts to learn and expand our understanding through serious prayer. We're going to talk more about what that means and why that's important beyond just reading. One of the prolific writers, and you'll get some exposure to him. I probably learned more about the last days from him than anyone else. You'll learn about him because you're going to get a handout later about him. But he made this statement. He said, most of us don't spend the time going to the original source. Who's the original source? It's our Heavenly Father. And the bottom line is, if you don't ask, you'll never receive. And he gave tons of examples throughout history of how so many people really never took the time. You think about Laman and Lemuel. What they say, this isn't made known to us. And what did Nephi happen when he saw Father told him vision? I want to learn for myself. So he asked and he got more. Point is, that's an important component of really understanding and knowing truth clearly. The bottom line is, another reason a number of people don't know a lot of things about the last days is they figure, we're just going to have the general authorities tell us that. In general conference, they're just going to teach us all the stuff we need to know. In fact, I will not name a name, but I have one of my siblings that I brought this stuff up, and she just said, we'll just have to have President Nelson tell us in general conference when we're ready to go back to the New Jerusalem. It probably ain't going to happen. And look at what Elder Bednar said. Each member of the church has an individual responsibility to learn. We should not expect the church as an organization to teach or tell us everything we need to know and do to endure to the end. That's what Elder Bednar said. Rather, our personal responsibility is to learn what we should learn that will enable us to withstand the evil day. He's talking about the last days, in case that doesn't ring a bell for you. If all you or I know is what other people, including the general authorities, if all we know is what we learn from others, then our foundation was built upon sand. This is one of the 12 apostles that's telling us, A, don't expect to get everything from us, and B, if all you get is from other sources, instead of yourself, you're going to be, sadly, unprepared. Some people don't want to hear about the harsh realities because they have this mistaken idea that they'll never, if they're really good people, we're Latter-day Saints, we're temple goers, we're doing things that we ought to do as committed disciples of Christ. We're not going to have to mess with this stuff. The really bad stuff, that will only happen to the really wicked people who will face the calamities. After all, we're the chosen people of Israel. We're fine. We'll be protected. We don't need to worry.
Those with this perspective might remember that some of the prophets, now, in case you don't know this, there are a number of prophets that have seen our very day thousands of years ago. They know exactly what we're going through and what we're going to go through. And some of those very prophets have actually said that none will be spared from confronting horrible things. And that's part of the sifting process. That's part of the testing to see if we can make it to the millennium. So anyone that thinks they're going to get a pass because they're good, Think of what happened to most of the apostles at the time of Christ. Most of them were killed. I'm not saying we're all going to get killed, but to think that somehow we're going to be spared from the really ugly things, and there's a lot of really ugly things that are going to happen, is just not true. So a thorough reading of the scriptures will make it clear that even covenant keepers, I think probably a lot of you in this room are covenant keepers. Some of the prophecies say many will be deceived, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how that might happen. And some will be utterly destroyed in the cleansing. We'll talk about that also. Unless it's Heavenly Father's plan that we're going to make it. And he wants us to be in the millennium, and so he will spare us. And there are a lot of things we'll read about and learn about that give us hope for being protected. But don't expect that that's going to happen just because you're a good person. Now,
Trace?
yes.
I don't want to throw you off your stride here, but I think all of us here have concerns about the last days, and you're trying to convince us of something where we're already there. I wonder if we could skip forward to the part about
We're
marriage.
almost there. Okay. But
You know how much I love you.
I'm only bringing this up because I'm surprised. I'll tell you two things. I'm speaking for myself, okay? I go back 5 years ago. Okay, how many of you ever heard, some of you have heard the name the Apocrypha?
Oh, yeah.
How many of you have read Ezra? Some of you have, some of you haven't. But there's a lot of people, the vast majority of people don't. Did you know the Apocrypha? Many books in the Apocrypha were all included in the Bible until about 1895. So Joseph Smith and all the people that had the King James Version had all the books of the Apocrypha, as did Joseph. And some of those books in the Apocrypha are some of those that say a lot of really important things about the last days. I was clueless about it, so maybe I'm pointing my fingers to myself. Maybe you probably are among those that knew a lot more, but I'd heard about last days. Most of us have. We'll get into that. But the point is, there's a lot of us are pretty familiar. Well, we know that when we hear about last days, most of us think a lot of negative stuff. There's plenty of negative stuff. But that's some reasons we don't want to hear about it, because that was like a sister of mine. Don't talk to me about that. Just let the prophet tell us we need to go. That's okay, but it's not really quite sufficient. Sorry, we'll get into this. I think, thanks for trying to make it move along. Yes.
So a lot of people think of the Apocrypha as fringe, way out there. But like you said, it was in the Bible. And when Joseph asked, should he do a translation of it? The Lord says, no, it's good enough. It's for those, there's some inaccuracies, but those that have the Spirit will be able to discern those.
There's a lot of truth in
And
the
it's for
Apocrypha,
your benefit.
Yes.
Yeah, the problem I'm finding is because I've been wanting to read, I love to read apocryphal records or records outside of what's canonized. But I've been having a hard time finding an apocryphal publication that I feel like I can trust without somebody else's opinions interjected or it being.
There actually, I don't have it up here, but there's an entire volume that's got all of the Apocrypha books.
But is it like, has it
It's
been
not,
changed?
it's without commentary.
It's without commentary.
Yeah.
Do you know if that's more like, hasn't been changed over time, that kind of thing? Because we're facing a lot of that even with our own scriptures.
Yeah.
And so I just
It's a
haven't
good
found a source
question,
that
but
I've trusted yet.
Actually, my wife has probably read more in our book of the companion of different Apocrypha than I have, but I can't ask her right now, so it's a legitimate question. Yeah.
So we were in Sunday school one day, and one of the ladies, bless her soul, she said, well, someday when we're righteous enough, we'll get, the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon and other things. And I had to zip it and not say that we already have the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jasher, that have been saved and written for those saints of the latter days. And there's
Because I'm speaking for myself. I've heard of the Apocrypha. I think I might have heard of the book of Jasher. I've never read any of that stuff. So, I am among those people, yes.
I was just going to say, David Hawking has really great books. Like at the Book of Mormon Wayne May conference last week that we did, they have the Book of Enoch, the Book of Asher. He broke it down. It's just really fantastic. He's got several other books, but
there's a wide variety of resources.
Come Follow Me we do with Kay Godfrey. He 3 years ago, and it's still online, kind of went through the apocryphal books. He got a brand new set he was all excited about. But
So after this is over, why don't you talk to him? He can probably give you some more information about access to that he's familiar with. I haven't read that. Okay, here's another reason a lot of people don't want to learn about the last days. Think about yourself. Haven't a lot of us spent much of our lives trying to achieve things, acquire things? Our careers, our homes, our investments, our whole lives have been based on what we've tried to do. And yet, if we take at face value what some of the prophecies tell us about the last days, we may have to give up almost everything. People don't want to think about that. If you've spent your lifetime doing these things that were meaningful to you and you thought were important to provide security for yourself and your family and whatever, and then you're thinking, wait a second, this is some conversation about, is that all going to go away? Well, we don't know for sure, but it could. And that's why a lot of people don't even want to think about the last days. That's another reason. Okay, I kind of said it and you read it there. Trying to move it along, D, sorry. The truth is, there are plenty of people have a hard time dealing with any change at all. Some of the kinds of really, really tough things, radical changes, I think those are going to be hard for almost all of us. So the fact that most of us we kind of like to keep our lives nice and even and predictable and all that, and don't expect that to happen continually, especially in the next few years. Okay, here's the upshot. A lot of us just want to avoid it because that's uncomfortable. And yet sometimes we keep our head in the sand. We just don't want to hear no evil, see no evil, because we somehow think that's going to work out for us. But it doesn't help us to do our best, especially in terms of preparation. We can put our heads in the sand if we want to, or ignore it, or pardon?
Yeah.
But probably most of us have sometimes put our head in the sands over some things. Well, there's plenty of people that keep their heads in the sands about the last days. But I think we're doing ourselves a great disservice, because if we really want to prepare for things, even really, really uncomfortable, horrendous, tough things, we darn well better know about it rather than just avoid even thinking about it. I think that's a more correct principle. The meaning of the last days, it's really between now and the millennium, is essentially what that's really about. And the last days, by the way, will include characterized by both wonderful and horrendous events, culminating in the return of the Savior. And for those who somehow think, we're kind of getting close, no. That's what President Nelson said. We are in the last days already. So if anyone has any doubts about that, unless you don't believe President Nelson, he's made that very clear. So what can we know and expect? Can we? Yeah, because for thousands of years, we've had a number of prophets, especially, that have not only seen our day, but have been prophesying and letting us know about our day. And so we can access what they had to say that is very germane to us now. So here are 4 different kinds of things we can do to know what will happen. First of all, we have the scriptures and the words of the prophets and others we trust. I am one who I have a great faith in prophets, but I also believe that there are some people who don't have a prophetic mantle, or they're not apostles that have done decades of research about things and under inspiration and prayer, and I trust them because of things that I've familiar with what I've been learning by them. So, another thing, and this is some of you are, I'm sure, familiar with, to identify the patterns, the types and shadows from the past that foreshadow our times, especially in the Book of Mormon. Some of you might recall, probably, it seems like most of you in this audience are probably remember Ezra Taft Benson.
Oh, yeah.
He was one of the prophets who, more than most, really put a huge emphasis on the importance of the Book of Mormon. And among other things that he said, other reasons, he told us, we all ought to read it, et cetera, et cetera. But he was very focused on reading the Book of Mormon because he told us in many different times, he said, the things that happen in the Book of Mormon are exactly the things that are happening and will happen to us now. So if you want to find out what's going to happen in the last days, just read the Book of Mormon, especially certain sections of it. You get prior to the time of the Savior came and visited the people in Bountiful. If you just read some of those chapters, it's like, what? This was going on 2,000 years ago. And guess what? The same kind of stuff is happening right now. So if you want to get an understanding of things we can expect in the last days, look for the foreshadowing and the types from the Book of Mormon. Another thing is to pay attention to both covenantal cursings and blessings. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And then to really have an open mind to what's going on in the world. So here's an important parallel. How many of you, probably most of you have read Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was a season of light. It was a season of darkness. It was a spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. He said quite a bit more, but those are the essential things that Charles Dickens said in his opening paragraph 2, Tale of Two Cities. Why are we putting up this parallel with Charles Dickens? Because as life hurtles forward, we are going to, in these last days, encounter both extremes. It will be both the best of times and the worst of times. A season of light, season of darkness, spring of hope, winter of despair. People think it's going to be one or the other. No, it's going to have both. And we're going to get to the good parts, the positive things, the blessings and the miracles tonight. But we've got to pay attention that both of those things are present during the last days. So, what's my hope? That we can, rather than experiencing primarily as the winter of despair, that we can largely feel during the last days that spring of hope. Rather than primarily experiencing these last days as a season of darkness, we can benefit from the season of light. And rather than just feeling so much of what we're going through as the worst of times, we can experience a great deal of what will make these last days the best of times. That's my hope. That's why I'm covering this and accomplishing this. So people ask the questions, why do we have to go through the worst times? It's a wake-up call, among other things, the really tough stuff. And it will help us to, among other things, a lot of people didn't get the wake-up call because we weren't paying attention or we didn't think about it. But the truth is, these last times, especially the really worst of times, it will serve as a way to sift the wheat from the chaff, from the tares, and it will function as the trials to prove our faithfulness. So there are important reasons. People talk about that forever. Of course, we're in life. We've heard this a zillion times. Of course, we go through problems. But I think the kind of problems we're going to be going through are a lot more profound than any of us will have ever encountered. So still remember that no matter how problematic the tough times are, it's all for a purpose. It's to sift us and it's to prepare us to prove our faithfulness. So one of the phrases that's often used when we talk about the last days, I'm sure you're familiar with this from the scriptures, the great and terrible day of the Lord. We're going to, in this discussion talk first of all about some of the terrible aspects and then the great things, great and terrible day of the Lord. Cover them all. Now, most of us, probably when we think about last days, we're pretty familiar with references to a lot of the negativity, the horrendous things that are going to happen. We already know that. But still, let's identify what some of them are going to be. Massive scale natural disasters, earthquakes. Now, I don't know if you know this, but this is some of the interesting things that are going to happen. This is more than earthquakes when it says the earth is going to rock to and fro off its axle even. I mean, these are things that are going to happen in these coming days. Pardon?
I've been getting, I don't know very much.
You already felt it. Well, remember, some of these things have been going on. We've had oceans overheaving their bounds. We've had a lot of different things, but there are going to be even more of them. Yes?
I was going to mention real quick, because you know Hal Jensen, the man, my good friend that opened up Indonesia. When he went with President Packer after the tsunami over there, President Packer told them that was a fulfillment of the prophecy in Dr. Cohen's that Earth would heave beyond its bounds.
That's what Elder Packer said
Yes.
to Hal Jensen,
Yes.
a joint friend of ours. Thank you for sharing that. I wouldn't have known that. So anyway, economic collapse, we're kind of moving that way anyway. I mean, pestilence, famine, terrorism, I don't need to, you can read them. We already know, we've heard about a lot of these things. People killing one another on a massive scale, invasions from foreign enemies, marauding troops. I mean, these are things that have been predicted that are going to happen in these last days. And if that wasn't enough, here's a few more. There'll be widespread panic and anxiety. The phrase is used more than once in the scriptures. Men's hearts shall fail them. Go back when you think about what happened during the Great Depression. People jumped out of skyscrapers because they thought they'd lost everything. They had no hope. It was total despair. Their hearts were failing them because things were so awful and they didn't know what else to do. Iniquity shall abound. False teachings and false belief will be rampant. We already got a lot of that going, I think. That's already part of our last days. Pay attention to this one though, because it's a little scary. Even the very elect. Hopefully, we would like to think that a lot of us are part of the very elect, and others even more elect. Even some will be deceived. We'll talk a little bit more about that specifically. The men of men, love of men shall wax cold, children shall rise with parents, etc. So, the other thing, and I want to make sure we kind of get this, because what happened in the time of Noah? There was so much iniquity that the entire earth was cleansed by flood, and with 8 survivors, right? Well, guess what? There's going to be another cleansing of the earth, but this time it's going to be with fire, not with a flood. But remember, when you think about it, think about what did the Lord say about doesn't want to dwell with unclean people that are unclean and wicked in any degree. They're going to be wiped out because when he comes to do his millennial reign, he wants the earth to be rid of the really ugly, awful people and wickedness. And that's one of the reasons that will be behind the cleansing of the earth with fire. So it's a prerequisite for our Savior to come and reign. Many of the problems are associated with covenantal blessings and covenantal curses. We'll go through some of those in a minute. How many of you have heard of the broom treatment? Okay. So the broom treatment has to do with the talk about covenantal blessings and curses. There have been great videos on this and in books about the reminder that this land of America wasn't just the chosen land for a reason. There are covenants associated with people that have been allowed to live in America. And the covenants were, and this happened clear back, even the Pilgrims, they knew it when they got here. They knew this was a covenant that they were making. George Washington knew it when he first took the oath of office. He knew that he was presiding over a covenant land. And he was not a member of any particular church, but he still knew enough about the scriptures. He put his hand right on the scriptures that talked about that. The point is, now I'm going to say things some people are not going to like, but I think they've been prophesied. And it's my belief. This is my belief about that. I think we're about at a time where there's no going back. I think there's enough wickedness in this land. I think there are enough people here that have rejected the God of heaven, the great Jehovah, and have been blatantly going against his laws and covenants, that the covenantal cursing associated with the United States of America is going to occur, and there will be a broom treatment. And that means they'll be swept off the promised land. That happened to the Jaredites. That happened to the Nephites. And we have been privileged to live in this land now for a couple of hundred years. This has been a choice land. I think my personal opinion is the time is not going to be much longer before this is going to also happen, that a lot, not everyone, but a lot of people are going to be swept off this land, because that's part of the covenantal cursing that's associated with the United States of America. A lot of things that are about that. We can read more, but okay. Now, as we get into this concept of the last days, I want you to think of 4 different factors that are hugely impactful on the last days. The first one, referred to in the scriptures multitudes of times as the Whore of Babylon. The Whore of Babylon is really associated with all those who are trying to undermine God and his kingdom and all righteousness. Many forms it takes on, and it's been around, because it's not just a thing that is here or it's gone, for millennia. However, there's an interesting subset of the Whore of Babylon that are referred to as secret combinations. Even the Jaredites, some of those people, the part of their demise was because there were secret combinations going on among the Jaredites. And ultimately, that whole nation perished because of that. Now, I'm going to go back to President Benson, because I don't know how many of you recall this, but in one of the talks he gave, President Benson was a little bit of a controversial prophet, even before he became the prophet. There were a number of people that didn't care for him because he was so conservative, vocal, and very conservative. They didn't like that.
Well, he spoke truth.
Yeah. Not a lot of people like to hear that. But there's one element that I'm paying attention to now as it relates to this, is in our times, how often do people just write off what you say, including a lot of truth, as, oh, that's conspiracy theory. Do you know what President Benson said about that? He said in the Book of Mormon, there was no conspiracy theory, only conspiracy facts, right. Not theory. So again, some people don't want to hear that, but it's the truth. And we have been undergoing ramifications and impacts of the secret combinations that are carrying out hugely destructive things in our country and in other places in the world. So that's factor number 1. A second one is, I'm going to put with a capital T, the Antichrist. We know that at different points in time, including in the Book of Mormon, there were different individuals that were referred to as an Antichrist. But they won't hold a candle to the last Antichrist that's been prophesied about in the last days. He's referred to sometimes as the stout horn, sometimes as wormwood, but this is a guy that has huge power and will impact the entire earth in ways that we can't even imagine. Enough said for now. However, those 2 factors are pretty much on the negative side. But now we got some positive things too. The third one is called either the return, but really the restoration of the lost 10 tribes. We'll talk more about that. But that's going to have a huge, primarily positive impact on the entire world, but especially starting right here in America. That'll be a huge blessing. And then finally, the other factor are the covenantal promises that have been made to Israel. Talk about both of those. Let's just talk about some of the things that are going to happen during the last days. I'm going to focusing first on a little bit the horrible things. We'll get to the positive things later. But these are things, a lot of these things I was unaware of. Some of you are probably a lot more into learning things about the last days and other things than I am, but I'm kind of new to this game. I did not know all this stuff. So, among other things, now, you can take this with a grain of salt. You need to do it on your own. But these are some prophecies by one of the prophets who was a contemporary. In fact, he was a brother of Daniel. Ezra was a brother of Daniel. And he was given information to complete some of the visions, an understanding that was given to Daniel, but Daniel didn't get it all. And so Ezra was given even more to understand more of the things that his brother Daniel didn't get. Okay? And Ezra, among other things, and this is an apocryphal book, you can read for yourself, decide for yourself, but he talks about some pretty amazing and pretty problematic things that he prophesied are going to happen in this country. I'm not going to say more. If you're interested, I'll let you read for yourself and decide that. But the point is, it's my belief that right here in America, very, very, very soon, some horrific things are going to happen that are going to throw a wrench in all of our lives that we've never even contemplated. And I'm talking real soon. I'll let you go to the book of Ezra, but this could be starting to happen way soon. And among those things, what will happen according to the prophecy of Ezra, this is a prophet that said, he saw it in vision, this is what he said would happen. He said that the governance of America would not now be an elected president. It was going to be taken over. The governance of America was going to be taken over by some of these really evil, evil people. Okay? And here's the deal between, we talk about the Whore of Babylon and some of the really wicked people that were part of that cabal, because it's worldwide. It's not just here in America. But that what would happen is the Antichrist, with a capital T, the Antichrist will be so glad, and he'll be wooing these people that are in charge of our country and to say, good for you. And we won't like it because they're going to rule our country in ways that are horrific. And then what will happen? And when he does that, it will be one of his ways of deceiving all of us, because we're saying, hooray for this guy. He's got rid of these awful people that have been in charge and ruining our lives and ruining our country. Guess what happens? Do you think the Antichrist is someone that you could just trust? Oh, no. He does a flip-flop. And he then this is part of the way he persuades a lot of us that he's probably a pretty good guy. Plus, he's going to have amazing powers. He will be able to do miracles that we won't get. He will have knowledge of science that is way beyond what we understand about science. So he will do things and we'll say, how could he do this? He will proclaim himself to be a divinity, even God. But then what will happen is he'll do this tricky trick flip, and he will then almost immediately eliminate the people that are in charge of America, because guess what? He wants to be in charge of America all by himself. And so the Antichrist will be in charge of America, and he will make it even worse. If you think about the most awful things that have happened under despots or people that you don't like, the way they govern, multiply that by about 50 or so, and you'll get the kind of things that will happen under the Antichrist when he's in charge. And he will have such power that nobody will be able to stop him. Not even the righteous, not even the elect will be able to stop the Antichrist from doing such horrible things. And then guess what happens? Then we have the lost 10 tribes. You'll have to read about this in detail yourself. But here's what I've come to believe. I didn't know any of this stuff. But what does the Article of Faith say? We believe in the literal gathering of Israel and in the restoration of the lost 10 tribes. It didn't say return, it says the restoration of the lost 10 tribes. And when the Savior spoke to the Nephites in the land bountiful, he talked to them about the lost 10 tribes. And he said, I've been, the Jews didn't know about you, and I'm here talking to you. You were some of the other sheep that are not of that fold. But now, guess what? I'm going to go talk to the other part of Israel. And he wasn't talking about we know that the 10 tribes of Israel, some of them were scattered throughout Asia, Russia, etc. But those are kind of the limited number of the 10 tribes. The significant body of the 10 tribes were led away to a place no one had ever been before. And when you read the scriptures, and it talks about return, guess where it says they're coming from? From the outer parts of heaven. So the last 10 tribes haven't been on this planet for a long time, and they've been promulgating under a huge population of good guys. Remember, there's 3 elements of Israel. What do we have? The Jew, the tribe of Judah, tribe of Joseph, and then we have the 10 tribes. The 10 tribes are going to return, and when they return, it will be incredible. The scriptures talk in multiple places, like when they return to the earth, nobody will ever even think about what happened with Israel when they crossed the Red Sea. The huge miracle that happened, that the waters were parted and they were led across to dry land and got out of Egypt. The miraculous way in which the 10 tribes will return will completely supplant that as far as what people talk about from then on as being a miraculous way that Israel is being blessed. Okay. Anyway, what will happen is there's some of the 10 tribes that are here. We know that. They're throughout Russia. They're throughout places in Asia. We know they're remnants of the 10 tribes, but the huge body of them, according to Scripture, were left the planet, just like the city of Enoch did, just like the city of Melchizedek did. They left, and all 3 of them are going to come back. Okay? So anyway, what will happen is when they come, because I had this wrong. I thought the remnant of Israel, they're discussing the Book of Mormon, what they're going to come, what they're going to do. I thought that was the Lamanites, the descendants of the Lamanites. Oh no. When you read the scriptures that talk about them coming like a lion among lambs and will utterly destroy, their role is to wipe out, or at least overcome, especially the Antichrist, who will be so powerful, nobody else will be able to take him out, but they will. So among other things, their role is to take out the Antichrist. In fact, they will wipe him and his constituents out so quickly, he won't know what hit him. And he won't be able to do anything because he was first trying to oppress this part of Israel, those of us who live in this land. So guess what he's going to do after that? He leaves America and he goes to Asia. And he wants to take out the other Israel there. And then he also wants to take out the Muslims, because the Muslims also hate the Antichrist. They've talked about the Antichrist. And so he will take on the Muslims and he will take on. So anyway, that's another thing. But the Antichrist will then be driven from America. And when that happens, that will lay the foundation for then. What do we hope is going to happen in this land? The New Jerusalem, which will come down largely from heaven, as well as additional parts we built. But so in other words, thanks to the lost 10 tribes, we in America will now have the huge blessing of having the New Jerusalem right here, and many, many other blessings associated with that. But the Antichrist will be gone. Anyway, so that's part 1 of some of these things that are going to happen in the last days. Let's move on. Additional things. Okay, we talked about the secret combinations, the Antichrist himself. He will deceive even the elect of God. And we will perceive him as a good guy, but then we can't get rid of him. His persuasion will come through, initially he's getting rid of the bad guys, and then we'll say, hey, good for you, we wanted to get rid of those guys. Nope. He's a tricky trick. He's a liar. Okay. The true nature of the Antichrist will be made manifest, including this is in the scriptures. You ever heard of the abomination of desolation? He will be able to enter our temples. And he will proclaim himself as God, and he will expect people to worship him. And if we don't, people that don't worship him are going to be in bad way. So this is the time where it's going to really test us. How strong is our testimony? How strong is our loyalty when we have great persecution and pressure put upon us? But these are the kind of things that will happen. He's going to get rid of it says that we won't have sacrament meetings and stuff. I mean, he's very powerful. He'll have a huge impact on us in ways that we don't like. And yet, culminating with being able to enter actually our temples. So under the evil reign, he will make our lives awful. No one will be able to do anything. And then we have part 2, then we have the last 10 tribes. I've kind of already gone over some of that stuff. So then he'll direct his nefarious efforts to the Eastern Hemisphere, because the lost 10 tribes no longer lost. Remember some of the prophecies that says about what will happen when they come? They will bring their great treasures. They will bring their scriptures. They will have had prophets, but they will not have had, what do we have on this earth? The temples. They will not have had the temple. So the tribe of Ephraim will be able to provide for the lost 10 tribes great blessings that they will benefit from. We will benefit from them. It'll be a great symbiotic, wonderful reunion of those parts of the tribe of Israel, of Joseph and the last 10 tribes. So an ongoing series of events will happen. Now we're going to shift over to the Eastern Hemisphere. You probably heard of different things. You ever heard about the Davidic servant?
Yep.
And have you heard about the 2 prophets that will be very powerful, and they'll be able to resist the Antichrist for quite a while, but then things will work out so they're allowed to what? Die. He will take them out, and they will lie dead in the streets for how long?
3 days.
3 days. And after 3 days, what will happen? They will rise from the dead. And this will mark, because this is in the face of the Antichrist, who have thought he was so hot in being able to accomplish this. But then, this is now toward the beginning of the end. What happens after that? Shortly after that, who then comes and sets his foot on the Mount of Olives? The Savior, Jesus Christ. And he will then engage the world in pretty short order to save that part of Israel. And it will be a huge blessing that our Savior Jesus Christ will come, and he will then personally direct the wiping out of the rest of the bad guys that are in Israel, which will allow the last 10 tribes and other people to come and dwell there in their promised land.
Question.
Yes.
I'm just curious if you have an idea of what those 2 prophets will be, because I've heard different theories.
So have I, so I'm not going to even go there, because different people have had different. You have some thoughts? Yes and no, because the truth is, my knowledge about this, okay, I'm going to tell you something. About a month ago, we finished an 8-month study course about Isaiah. And this was like 2 or 3 hours a week. We were involved with some other people. We learned tons of things, and we touched on that. But I still have questions about the Davidic servant. So my knowledge about that is pretty limited. But some of these references I'm going to give you to review for yourself will have a lot more information about that, or a lot better. The question was, who is the Davidic servant? What I understand about the Davidic servant, because I did read this recently, is he will be a descendant both of Judah and of Ephraim. That much I do recall. He will have. Some sort of new prophet on the scene. Someone that's beyond what we expect. I don't think it's someone that we probably already know. I believe so. I'm not sure. I mean, there's more. I profess that I need to learn a lot more before I could begin to try to answer that question, which was a good question.
Do you know the names of those 2 prophets?
I don't think their names have been given.
We don't know if they're Jewish prophets or LDS prophets, right?
They will be powerful prophets, and I think Susan, you're shaking your head or something?
They're going to be powerful enough to withstand the Antichrist and all of his
For years.
for years. So, are they going to be some type of translated beings that come?
Probably.
Because they're going to have
Likely they'll be translated. Yeah.
Well, except they're able to be killed.
But that was because Christ was able to be killed too when he allowed that to happen. Yes.
I thought there was a statement that
What?
I thought there was a statement by the general authorities saying they would be members of the Quorum of the 12.
I don't think there's ever anything definitive that's been stated that way. I've heard that's part of theories. Anyway, we'll move on. But good questions, but I can't answer them.
But then that's why we have curiosity to learn something.
I'm going to give you see those books? You know how many? Couple thousand pages at least in these books. I'm going to give you references to things you can read a lot more. This is not something that you can learn in an hour and a half very well. I'm trying to give you a synopsis of some of the key things. But to really learn more, you got to study more. And you got to pray for yourselves. Okay. Need to move this on. So we've been talking quite a bit about the worst of times. How about if we talk and turn our attention a little bit to the best of times during these end times, okay? So, first of all, President Nelson, what did he have to say about it? In the coming days, we will see the greatest manifestation of the Savior's power that the world has ever seen. Now, the world has seen a lot of the Savior's amazing powers in the past, in the previous 6 millennia, right? This says, President Nelson says, the greatest display of the Savior's power the world has ever seen. And he will bestow countless privileges, blessings, and miracles upon the faithful. So now we're starting to talk about some of the greatest, best of times things. And that's what President Nelson said. Specific advice is, now this was 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago. He gave us an advice, and I bet you not 5% of the church ever did this. He said, I encourage you to make a list of all that the Lord has promised he will do for covenant Israel. I think you will be astounded. And we will. And we're going to go over just a couple of those things. But he's suggesting, he's actually encouraging that we do this. That we take the time to go through the scriptures and study what are the covenants of Israel and what are the blessings associated with those covenants. Because if we spend the time thinking about it, and then he says, ponder about it, discuss it with your family and your friends, and then live and watch for these promises to be fulfilled.
Are those promises in the patriarchal blessing?
I'm sure that's where some promises, I'm sure some people have received blessings in their patriarchal blessings that are going to be pretty miraculous, and some of them are going to be fulfilled during these end times. Yeah. Let's talk about just a few selected examples. I'm only going to refer to some of the ones that Avram Gileadi, when he went through, and these are some of the ones, whoops, shoot. Okay, let's doggone it. I think this is the first one. Your peace will be as a river, your righteousness like the waves of the sea. That's kind of nice. People that would like peace will have great peace. When you cross the waters, I will be with you. And by the way, to get to the New Jerusalem, some people are going to have to cross waters, which a lot of times get governed by Satan and his hosts. But the righteous will be blessed, so they'll be able to cross the waters safely. And you will not be overwhelmed. Though you walk through fire, there's going to be a lot of fire going on during these last days too. You shall not be burned. Those are pretty nice blessings when there's chaos of burning going on all around us. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. There are going to be people that are continuing to curse, even more so than they have in recent times. We, as Latter-day Saints, we've been so blessed in the last, most of my lifetime. We haven't been persecuted much at all compared to the way the early saints were. We're going to be persecuted a lot more even in the early saints were. But the point is, we're going to be blessed. Even those that try and curse us and do us ill, they will be against. I will strengthen you, succor you, and uphold you. Blessed shall you be in the city, in the field, wherever you come in and out. That's good to know. If we're coming in and out of our homes, that in spite of some of the horrendous things happening, we can feel protected. Yes.
Because one of the things I think we should keep in mind is, one of the things that the prophet has told us numerous times is that we need to understand the power of the priesthood, and we need to understand for women the power of the priesthood that we can exercise. And because as Satan's power becomes more pronounced in the last days and the Antichrist comes to take over, Heavenly Father has to give us more power so that we can be guided, directed, and withstand, and so that we can survive. So that's one of the things, as the prophet has counseled us, we need to understand the access to the power that we have and to be able to try to start nurturing that and develop that faith so that we can then be able to withstand the challenges.
Because we're going to need it. We're going to need an extra level of empowerment, big time, because the atrocities and the problems we're going to face are going to be huge. And by the way, yeah. By the way, along those lines, let me just speak to what she just said, because one of the last slides I'm going to present is a talk that President Nelson gave when he was president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles 8 years ago. And this followed a talk he gave to the women in a women's conference. And then what I'm going to refer to, and I'm hoping you'll read it, it's one of the best talks ever you'll read, talks about this very thing. But this particular talk was addressing the priesthood brethren. But the point is, it's really discussing that very issue in much more specificity. Okay, yes. Sorry.
I think, as we're learning this, you can see in the past how the Lord protected the people to come to Salt Lake and come through. They went through fires. They went through a lot of things, and so we hold on to that. But when he talks about the priesthood and how women, they use their priesthood through the power of their husbands and those around. I don't think we realize we have that with our spouses, and that we just haven't used it to the point to what we will be taught.
We could have an hour and a half discussion about that topic alone. No, it's very important, because a lot of times women tend to feel like they get short-shrifted or whatever, but the reality is, and President Nelson's very aware of this, and he tries to remind women they too have immense blessings and potential power that they haven't even begun to tap into.
Nelson gave that talk to women in 2019, the spiritual treasures. It's all about women are not using the power they've been given through the priesthood. They don't understand it.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. That was 2019. The talk I'm referring to was in 2016 when he was the president of the Quorum of 12, and in 2015 in October conference is when he talked to women, even prior to the one in 2019. But President Nelson has repeatedly shared ideas that are very important for us to wake up and pay attention to concerning the last days and things we need to do. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, we'll be guided like the tribe Israel was when they were wandering and left Egypt. Everyone will re-inherit. I like this concept. Those who gather to design from among the nations shall re-inherit all the blessings of the covenant. Because there's plenty of people that will be coming to, especially the New Jerusalem, when it's set up that way, that will not have had all these blessings of the covenant available to them, and they're going to get them. Okay? I like this one. The people who inhabit it shall be forgiven their iniquity. Oh my. I think that's a pretty great blessing that we can anticipate that we'll be forgiven of our sins. Okay.
Why would that be that we will be forgiven just like that?
I need a lot of forgiving. Okay. These are three that were identified just in Isaiah 58. He will direct you continually. We need it continually. He will satisfy your needs in the dearth and bring vigor to your limbs. Remember, there's going to be famines and pestilences. There are going to be rough times. He will provide our needs. You shall be a rebuilder of fallen walls, restorer of streets for resettlement. I mean, these are some pretty amazing blessings. I will beat down his foes before his face. Whatever weapon is devised against you, it shall not succeed. Every tongue that tries to accuse you. Tyranny shall be no more heard in your land, nor dispossession or disaster within your borders. Think for a second about Judah, because of the three component elements of Israel, Judah, Joseph, and the last 10 tribes. Judah's probably had it the worst by far. And they've been dispossessed of their lands multiple times. Remember when the great pogrom happened, in the ones in Russia, the ones that happened in Spain, same year around that when Columbus came? You remember what happened there, right? The Jews got basically kicked out. If they didn't join the Christian faith, they were killed or exterminated, so they had to leave. All these Jews that had made a great life for themselves in Spain, kicked out of Spain. Anyway, what time is it? We're still getting there. Okay, I need to move along much faster. All right, New Jerusalem will be a refuge, opportunity to be led. Oh, I like this one. One of the blessings will be the opportunity to be led, taught by, and associate with the noble and great ones. Those of us who make it will be able to associate with some of the best spirits that have ever lived in eternity. Thank you for that reminder, Susan. And sorry, I need to move along. So, 3 additional major blessings, covenantal promises. Remember, these are the 3 that are associated with the American continent: protection, posterity, and prosperity, the return of the lost tribes, and his promise. This is interesting. Pay attention to what he said about how. Those who pay the price and do the spiritual work and measure up to the sacred ordinance you've received will be armed with righteousness, the power of God and great glory, have full power of the priesthood. Anyway, amazing promises there. Now, the bottom line is during some of the best times things, there'll be amazingly wonderful things that happen that we can't believe, associated with the gathering of Israel, the restoration of the lost tribes, and the building up of the New Jerusalem. And there'll be amazing spiritual power there. I think many of the saints that merit that will be translated. And they also will have many blessings, and they will reach the millennium. And then they'll live for 1,000 years. There'll be some amazing things happen that are part of the best of times. And I can't take more time because I've already taken too much. So, transitioning, we talked about this already, about the 2 prophets lying in the streets, the Battle of Armageddon. So, bottom line is amazing miracles and blessings. Truly astounding. Now, we're going to focus here a little bit on marriage, right? So, since we're trying to focus on marriage, let's shift gears. What can couples do to navigate the tough times and access the blessings? Remember, because we're going to have both the worst of times and the best of times, it's my purpose to make sure that I cover ground about things that couples can do that will address both. And why does that matter? Because couples with a thriving relationship, those are the ones that are best positioned to help one another during the last days. Why was one of the primary reasons marriage was established in the first place? So that we would have a helpmeet, a companion to share our daily lives with. Our spouse is potentially in a better position than any other person to support us and work with us and collaborate with us. So, why can marriage help us? Because those who have a strong and thriving relationship are in a position to collaboratively work together to confront the tough things and access the great blessings. So, here's the part it's just a reminder. Every couple alive has challenges. We all do. But there's some marriages that are really kind of marginal because they just struggle forever being able to kind of work well together. And people that have marginal marriages, when the tough times hit, it's going to be even tougher for them because they'll be hampered. They'll be doing some they haven't figured out 101 things. They need to deal with 202 and 303 at least kind of things. And so to the extent they've learned how to have a great thriving relationship, they'll be in a much better position to do that. Marriage today is challenging. We all know that. I got to move this thing along. So we all know these are just some of the kind of challenges that every marriage has. If you think marriage is challenging now, just think what's going to happen when we hit the tough times of economic crises, depression, bankruptcy, all kinds of things going on. Marriage will be even tougher with the problems of the last days. So how can a marriage partner, now these are things that couples need to be able to do to help us through that. Together, they need to learn how to make tough decisions about actions and reactions to what's going on around us. A lot of things are going to be going on around us. Couples need to be able to really dialogue and figure that out and work together. They need to be emotional and physical support, share the burden of responsibilities, and really be a best friend to lean on. So, let's see, did I? Oh, so these are a few questions for couples to ask. These are questions for you to ask yourselves. Is my spouse my best friend? Can I depend on them? Do we share mutual values? We work into the goals? Have we developed the skills to deal with differences and confront and resolve conflicts? Why are those questions? I keep getting cues from my wife. Thank you. Okay. I get feedback from my wife plenty, and I need it. Just like I do from a good friend.
I've got to get back to Utah County with the trailer.
Oh!
It's dark.
All right. Well, you'll catch this when we are going to record this, and I'll get you the rest of it.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Sure. No wonder you wanted it to move along quicker toward the good stuff and the important stuff. Sorry, you're going to miss it because it's going on now. So why are those questions important? Because they're associated with what really a healthy marriage is all about, what we call a thriving marriage. So what would it take for a couple to develop a truly thriving marriage relationship? In other words, but how do we both develop and maintain a thriving marriage relationship? Okay, now we're coming to this. This is part of my career you asked about. So after about 25 plus years of working with couples, both in the positives, when you work with couples that are going to marriage enrichment retreats, you're talking with couples that are they already have really good marriages, they're just making them better and better and better. And then when you're dealing with couples that are almost deciding if they're going to get divorced or not, that's a different kind of thing. I worked with them all. My doctorate was in family relations, and my master's was a clinical degree, and I worked with couples that had more serious problems. I worked with all of them. And when I decided, what I learned, what I tried to distill from that, is that there are certain things that all couples need to do if they want to have a thriving marriage. And these are the things. To implement the 6 practices for a thriving relationship. We'll come back to practices. Share, care. Sounds simple, right? If you have a thriving marriage, you just got to share, care, connect, confront, resolve, and grow. So my wife and I wrote a book. Very interesting. There were some cool stories about writing this book together. But trust me, if I would have written a book by myself, it would have been 800 pages and no one would have read it. One of Susan's many gifts is she is able to know how to make things more concise, readable, and so it's 232 pages now. It's just perfect because of Susan's, among other inputs from her. So here's some examples. Now we've got to focus on specific things related to what couples can do. Firstly, to address the challenges. We're going to focus, first of all, on the care practice. Okay? What does it mean to care? To care for one another is to nurture a best friends relationship with your husband or wife. Now you'll notice, why do you think I called these the 6 practices, not the 6 principles? Because you got to do something. Principles are ideals and lofty. No. Unless you do something about it, it ain't going to work. So that's what we call them. Every one of these is, you'll see they're verbs, things you got to do. Nurture a best friends relationship, okay? So here's an example, a specific example about the care practice, okay? Got Mary and Stephen, and they've got an economic collapse, job loss, financial insecurity, and guess what? Mary feels diminished respect for her husband. Now, if we go to the subset of the care practice, there's 6 essentials to nurture a best friends relationship, and one of those is respect. And Mary was not applying that principle. So, respect which is vital, should be based now. This is important because some people often get this one messed up. Respect should be based on internal qualities of our mate, their integrity, their goodness, their faith, rather than external factors. Why is that? Because the externals in our life change plenty. And yet, a lot of times, our respect for our mate is based mainly on externals. How good a provider, da-da-da-da-da. Oh, wait, what did I just do? How do I... Shoot, get rid of that. Okay, I hope that does fine. Okay, so the external factors in our lives can and do change. And some of these specific examples here about externals are related to things, problematic things that are going to happen in the last days. Okay? So, here's the question we need to ask ourselves. When the external changes occur, do we begin to lose respect and therefore start attacking our mate? Start blaming them because of the things that have happened externally. Oops, wait a second. So, yeah, I skipped through this. I missed a slide, that's an important one. So what do you need to do? What did Mary need to learn to do? She needed to learn to retain her respect by recognizing and dealing with your emotional needs and discussing those. A lot more could be said about that, but you can imagine when someone is angry, upset, blaming, a lot of times there are issues they have, they've got to get out. But then they need to refocus their feelings of respect on their internal qualities. She needs to begin to recount in her own life all the amazing qualities that her husband has. And once she does that, things change radically. And they can channel their efforts, joint efforts, toward addressing the real problems. Okay. Next example. Similar situation with Peter and Amanda. In this case, the economic collapse led to his job loss, financial insecurity. But in this case, now we're talking about Peter. He feels some anxiety. He's lost his job. He can't provide for his family. What's going to happen? So now let's go to one of the 6 components of a best friend's relationship, and that is support. Husbands and wives who have spent time learning how to effectively be there for their mates during their inevitable downtimes especially are better prepared to help them overcome feelings of serious depression, stress, anxiety, etc. So, here's the example. Now, listen, I'm going to just listen to these words and pretend you're Peter. And this is what, okay, somebody, here's a woman. Who would like to read this? I want you to pretend you're reading this to your husband. Someone, a female, please.
Oh.
Thank you. Read that.
Read it. Shajin's words are situations for women.
You don't have to get that person.
Industry has fallen apart. I understand how upset you are about how the baking industry seems to have fallen apart. But you need to know my confidence is in you, not simply in your skills as a real estate agent. I am totally confident we will find a way to deal with this job loss. And remember, I'm always here to support you.
How do you think Peter would feel if that's what Amanda was expressing, especially if it's not just a technique, but if she really feels it and she's expressing it? You think he'd feel supported? Big time. Do you think he'd go from anxiety to saying, hey, I got a wife that's really supportive. She's on my team. That's applying one of those elements. This is the supportive dimension of a best friend's relationship. Got to move on, though, because in fact, I better put this watch down here. Okay, now we have the example of David and Mariah, where their leaders are making some really questionable demands. They don't know about it. So what do? They need to apply the confront practice. What is the confront? Okay, we'll go to the confront practice, which is learn how to communicate concerns about tough stuff with your spouse. Think about challenges as a 2-part deal. The confront practice helps people to address the challenges, to bring up issues that are problematic in a way that's not likely to make their mate feel defensive. And then the resolve practice is how do you actually then, if you've learned how to confront the things first, how do you deal with differences and how do you resolve problems? So Bottom line, we're going back to confront. So one of there's 10 guidelines that we cover in this book about communicating concerns. And the 6th guideline is called be specific in identifying the concern. Because why is that? Because we need to be zero in with a very specific concern you need to focus on. If you're just, oh, this is horrible, we have this leader and he's leading us astray and I don't like blah, 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 blah. No, you need to be quite specific. So look at what this couple does. Their discussion is, look, we both agree that we're hearing conflicting advice about how to respond to the extreme requests being made by our government officials. Seems the first thing we need to do is determine who are those persons we trust that we believe actually are telling us the truth. You see what they're doing? They're being very specific in identifying a concern, because the more specific you can get, the more you can manage it and deal with it in specific ways rather than in general, oh, woe is us kind of ways. Now let's talk about some of the blessings and how the couples can access the blessings. So President Nelson's message again, armed with righteousness, the power of God, have the full power of the priesthood. What can couples do? So as part of the covenantal blessings, they're conditional, as a lot of blessings are. So it's depending on what are we going to do about it. So what couples can do is to put themselves in a position to access these blessings and miracles. So now we have another couple, Matt and Sarah. And this couple, they're very serious. They've listened to President Nelson's talks, and they've said, we want to have these blessings. We want to have this power. We're dealing with rough times, but we want to have the blessings that will help us to be empowered to overcome these tough times and have amazing feelings, good feelings during these last times. So let's go to the grow practice. And what does the grow practice say? Refine the shared vision. Oh, this is a fun chapter. There's some cool stuff in this chapter. Yeah, I think you'll like it. But refine that. And it's saying refine the shared vision and the spousal synergy. So we're just talking about, this is the guidelines for sharing. I got the wrong one. Anyway, this is their 5 guidelines for developing a shared vision. I changed it and then I didn't get the right one. This right one must be on my little, who cares? It's on this one instead of this one. Sorry. So these are the 3 elements, 3 of the 5 elements you need to do. Begin where you are, analyze and prioritize and establish goals and objectives in order to develop a shared vision. Only the shared vision part, not the synergy part. So they need to carry out a discussion and have planning meetings so they can prayerfully decide together what. Listen to how this correlates. They need to define which gospel principles are associated with becoming more Christ-like and living up to the divine potential that they want to consider, they want to focus their energies on first. So that's a prioritization. Number B is they need to assess where they're at so they can appropriately establish the goals for accomplishing that worthy aspiration. And they can evaluate. You see how it's very specific? They need to do these specific things. They're trying to get blessings from on high. These are some steps they're taking in order to do that. So, developing a thriving marriage helps. Okay. He fixed these slides this morning. I got the wrong one. Notice it says develop and maintain a thriving marriage. I want to share something with you. Some of you may know this. Some may have never thought of this. Some people act as though marriage is a trophy, and you work on it. And then we have a great marriage. We have a great marriage. That's not what marriage is all about. You don't reach a point and say we have a great marriage and it's static and you put it on a shelf. No, it's an ongoing relationship that requires ongoing work forever. So therefore, you don't just develop a thriving relationship, you got to maintain it. It's important. So that's why we wrote the book. That's what's in there. It's proven. There's about 10,000 people. I can't remember where. About 4,000 people in Mexico and Central America that been using our Spanish version of this and about 10,000 around the country. So it's pretty proven. This is not just something I kicked out and seeing what's happened lately. Notice it's called, remember, I used to be a therapist. You know? How do you maintain this without therapy? Self-help tool. Okay, so a thriving marriage is where you both know and then you implement the skills on an ongoing basis. So what is consistent? Because there's a book. This is the book we wrote. Thanks to Susan, she left the room again. Pretty cool book. You can thank Susan for a lot of the cool things that make it even better. But the book is really a handbook. It's only the handbook for a system. Now I'll describe a little bit more what the system's about. So first of all, what's in the book? Remember we talked about that? I'll go through all 6 because we only leveled some of them. Share, what it's about. We didn't talk about share before. Spend time in new and renewed shared experiences. We already talked about care. Connect, enhance the emotional and physical intimacy with your soulmate. Confront, we've already talked about that. Resolve. There's 2 components to resolve, both learning how to deal with differences and to resolve conflicts. This book, the whole thing's replete with practical, how do you do this stuff? And grow. Spousal synergy is one of the cooler parts that a lot of people never really develop, and it's a cool thing and you can do it. So here's a useful feature in the book. And if you were taking a college class, remember I was a professor for 8 years. If you were taking a college class and you were going to read a book, what's one of the more useful things you can do when you're reading the book? Each chapter, you go to the end of the chapter and read what are the main ideas so you can access what is it we're going to be learning in this chapter. And then you read the chapter together. And then at the end of it, you go back and you say, oh, these are the ideas. Let's see to what extent. So anyway, every chapter has a main ideas section. Then, not just, there's the one on resolve, shows you what it's like. There's 2 other elements. One of them is at the end of every chapter, they have 20 questions. Have you ever played the game 20 questions? This is not this is not a game. These are 20 questions, each one of which addresses some of the specific points of content that you've covered in the chapter. So it's asking you to, how are we doing with this? Are there things we can do a little bit better? By the way, I have a little bit of I'm going to call it, this is not just a bias, I was ticked. I remember when I used to read a lot of these marriage books, there was all these hook things. Oh, the problem with men is wives are this way. It's garbage. My last class I ever taught at university, I was teaching master's and doctoral level students in San Diego, and about the vast majority of them didn't know what they were doing, and they were just focused on all this negative profiling and stuff. It's not how you get couples to make changes and turn things around. Why am I saying this? Because the questions are not hook questions. They're not the kind of questions about, ooh, that's the way your wife is. Well, don't you know that women, blah, 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 blah. No, these are all questions that just ask you to address. And by the way, whenever you ask the questions, you always do it from a perspective of, how can we make this better? That's what you need to focus on when you're addressing the questions. Then you have an ideas to apply. The ideas to consider. There's another section. It tells you what are some ways you can apply that practice in your marriage. So the 20 questions, there's examples of it. I don't have time because we're running late. But okay, here's some of them. This is the 20 questions to ponder and discuss. Let's see. Have you carefully considered and discussed where each of you are in terms of the times and seasons of your lives, which is an important thing to discuss, especially for some of us that are at a season in our life where it's a little bit later. What are the implications of that being in that time and season? In developing a sense of shared vision, have the 2 of you determined which aspects call for dreams? There's a difference between dreams, which are goals, and which ones call for specific objectives. There's a difference between goals and objectives. We addressed that in there. Okay. Anyway, that's an example. Every chapter has a bunch of questions that are addressed. Then there's an ideas to consider. So here we go. Together discuss a communication book you've read or a tape series you've listened to. Cultivate open-mindedness by telling your mate you're eager to try out new. Anyway, the point is, you get the idea. Every chapter has some specific, suggested, possible ways that you can apply these practices. They're very specific, and they're always positive. Because I'm a positive guy, and I like to have couples be positive when they're trying to make their marriage better and better. So, then there's a part that used to be cool, but it's even better now. When we originally wrote the book, we had these little bookmarky kind of things called the Kiss Marriage Maker. Because now we got all these ideas. What are we going to do, and what are we going to make sure we can follow through with these ideas? So first we had these little, okay, where is it? These little look like bookmarks. We even have it color-coded, pink for the ladies, blue for the guys. Okay, so guess what's different now? Come on. Oh, I got to get rid of this thing. Okay, so this is an application tool, but guess what? Now it's downloadable. You can each put it on your downloadable handheld or whatever. So now you can do it, have it in your pocket, not as a little piece of cardboard that you might lose. Okay, and by the way, this is free. You get the Kiss Marriage Maker with it. Come on, downloadable. Gives you a chance. I'll give you some examples of this. Downloadable. Okay, now I'm going to give you a couple examples. I'll read a couple of these because I'm going to give you 3 examples, but I won't read them all. Because these are 3 different couples what they wrote down, they came up with their own ideas on their Kiss Marriage Maker. Okay, here's an example where the wife came up with 2 goals and the husband came up with 1. The wife says, go to the park after supper, and while we're swinging, share some of our favorite childhood memories. Let Kevin know that I'm willing to support him in the way he disciplines Sally, even though I personally prefer to handle her tantrums differently. Those are specific things that Mary said she was going to do that week with her husband. What did her husband say? Make it a point to ask Mary to tell me about 1 challenge and 1 good insight she's had during the day. He wants her conversations at the table. Yeah, you got a thing to vent about, but always make sure you come. Anyway, these are concrete things. The next example is the husband has 2 things he's choosing to do. The wife has 1. There's no magic wrong or right here. You do whatever you want. If you do 1 thing during the week, good for you. This last sample is where both the husband and the wife chose 6 different goals they were going to work on that week because they got to a place where they wanted to make sure they were working on all 6 practices. This is a pretty advanced stage where they got. Remember, there's no wrong. But the point is, it's a tool that gives you something concrete you can do. Okay, so enough said about that. Now, here's a question I want you to ask. Anybody should ask. What do you think would happen if both partners in any marriage or relationship determined and then followed through and carried out specific actions to make the relationship? What do you think would happen to any couple on the planet if they chose to do that? Okay? Dang it, this doesn't have this. Shoot, the next one was supposed to say, all right, how about you? What would happen in your marriage if you focused every week on making a specific decision, what you were going to do that week, what each of you were going to do? This is a 2-part deal. Marriage is a relationship between 2. It's not just a wife or a husband that does it. You got to do it together. So I missed that slide. But also there's an instruction booklet because there's all kinds of different couples. Probably most of you in this one are married couples. Some of you, let's see, no. Anyway, sometimes you get engaged or newlyweds. There's some different applications of how to use the system, slightly different for each of these sets. Even people in a relationship, not even married, can use this. Okay. In fact, I talked to a guy today. He says, when you go to that website, there's first you go to, there's a place where you can download the Kiss Marriage Maker, but then you download, there's 5 different kinds of instructional booklets you can download. Choose which one you want. It applies to you. Okay. And there's 3 different formats. Now that we finally focused to go with Amazon, now it's a bestseller with Amazon. But now they do it in not only hardbound, but paperback and ebook. So this is the place you go if you're interested in getting stuff from Amazon. And you can scan that if you want. I think it's still good. They did this a while ago, but I think it's still good. But if not, I'll show you at the end also. If you want to take a shot of it, do it. I'll come back. No. Shoo, what happened to the other version? Okay. Now, I'm going to tell you this. This is not just trying to double stuff. But this is, a marriage is about two people. You both need to have your own copies because it's not saying, okay, you read it and then later in the week. No, you need to be doing this together. So if you're serious about it, you got to get two copies. You get cheap ones. The ebooks are pretty inexpensive. So either way, make sure you get two. Why? So you and your partner can do it together, because that's the way you'll get the benefit out of it. You both need to be working on this. If it's just one of you, it ain't going to work. Both people need to work on it together. Okay, so now, shoot. Yep, we got it. I'm going to motor through the last few little comments. All right. I'm just reviewing what Elder Bednar said. If you think you're going to get this stuff from General Conference, you'll probably be disappointed, and you may be seriously lacking, because they're not going to tell us everything we need to do. Just a reminder of that. Second thing, two crucially important things are remain on the covenant path by honoring all your covenants so you can get the amazing privileges and blessings. President Nelson's given multiple talks where he addresses this very issue. And the issue is rise to the occasion. Live up to your privileges. You hold the Melchizedek priesthood. It has amazing powers. What are you going to do to access those powers? He's admonishing all of us to get serious about accessing the blessings. And then cultivate our ability to receive personal revelation, way important. So I don't know if you heard the talk by Elder Suarez. Just happened, where he talked about covenant confidence. You can develop confidence by doing all the right things, and it's a very important thing. But if you do that, you'll learn some specific ways to not just survive, but to thrive, which is the goal. So, the benefits, by the way, what happens if you learn to develop that covenant confidence? You will learn how to discern truth from error. Think about temple stuff. This is one of the benefits of getting good at personal revelation. You can feel confident with dealing with the tough stuff and better access to blessings. So, remember, this is a statement he said again and again. Only those who have learned to receive personal revelation will be able to survive. That was President Nelson's statement, and he said it more than once. Only those men, this is the one I'm going to write this down or remember it. April 2016, he was the president of the Quorum of the 12. It's one of the better talks I've ever heard about anything, but especially about this area of learning how to access priesthood blessings. But this is, in essence, these are some of the things he said. In a coming day, only those men who have taken their priesthood seriously by diligently seeking to be taught by the Lord himself and pay the price for priesthood power will be able to keep their marriage and family safe. During these tough times that are coming, we need to be able to, the men in this room, need to be able to do the things and feel confident that we can keep our families safe. This is what President Nelson said about that. So I highly recommend, you'll love the talk. So, I also hope that as a result of tonight, that we will have learned some ways of focusing on some of the really good feelings we can have during the last days. There's plenty of ugly stuff that's going to happen that will abound. But hopefully you've developed some ideas about how you can experience more of the best of times. And part of that is through the covenant confidence. So here's last couple of things. So what do I think about the last days? Hope you learned some things you found worthwhile. I hope, and this is the important thing, that you will make a choice to earnestly study and seriously pray So she'll shore up your understanding so that what Trace Tanner said here, you can maybe determine for yourself if you think if this is true or not, or which elements of it are true. You got to study and pray. And then determine ways that you can better prepare. Very important. Shoot, I'm going to get these out, and let me get them out right now. I was going to get them out before. Let's start passing these around. Yeah, I told you I was going to give you some stuff. You guys get extra set for your friends that had to challenge, had to cut out at the end. These are examples of references. A lot of them are here. And you'll notice that they have, give me one of those copies. You'll notice they have numbers. There's like 11 or 12 here. And that's a lot. And most people, what are you talking about? I don't have time for that. You may not have time for it. This is my recommended order. If you want to go through these, start with number one. And number one, one of the reasons you start with number one, it gives you a really good foundation. But guess what? This guy's I was telling you about, his name's Rush, Michael B. Rush. You can get this, download it for free. You can get the audio version of this for free. If you want to buy it, of course, you can buy it too. But that's kind of cool that he makes that offer for everyone. So that's the number one on my list. And then it goes through number 2, 3, 4 to get an exposure to some of the different kind of information that I've shared with you tonight. If you go through this, in that one, he'll talk about Ezra's eagle and all those prophecies. It's a pretty cool book. So bottom line is, this is my giving to you some things that you may wish to consider reviewing for yourself. Shoot. Now, back to marriage. My hope is that you've expanded your awareness of what it takes to develop and maintain a thriving marriage, a thriving relationship, and how you can both survive as well as thrive, and that you've made a decision that you're going to develop your own thriving relationship starting now, if you haven't done it before. Thank you for your time. I hope you've learned some things worthwhile. I got to say one last thing, because about half of you already have the book. And that's good. You've already got the books. Good for you. Some of you don't. So they're in the back. Would you go upstairs and tell Donna to come down there? So I decided, because you can get these from Amazon. I encourage you to go to Amazon. But I'm offering even less price than Amazon. Why not? So if anyone that wants to, either you've never had any before, you want to get some for your kids or whatever else, $20 a piece for the hardback. The retail is close to $28 a piece, except they're even offering them at $23.95, whatever, but with the shipping and stuff. If you want those, if you're going to get it, be serious and get two, because that's what it takes. So anyway, I know we've reached 9 o'clock. Some of you are going to want to just head out of here. Some of you might want to go back there if you're interested in getting anything. But by the way, this is way important. You wrote down marriagehighway.com. That's the website. And if you go on that website, I talked to the guy again today. He was going to do something different. He was going to actually put QR codes in the context of the on the website. So you can, those are free. You can download the instruction booklet. Some of you have already had the books but haven't been using the system. Yeah, you ought to review the instructional booklet. You ought to get the downloadable copy of the Kiss Marriage Maker. They might require you to get at least an ebook or something.